All
right. So go ahead and call to order the Planning Commission meeting for Gulf Manor for Monday, May 2nd, 2022. So start with a roll call attendance.
Mr. Simile.
Here.
Mr. Betcher.
Here.
Mr. Blathers. Here. Mr. Scott. Here. Mr. Snyder. Here. All members are present.
All right. Can I have a motion to set the agenda, approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We don't have anyone registered to address commission this evening. So minutes, we have the February minutes to approve. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Who moved what?
Mr.
So
Snyder.
Mr. Snyder made the motion to approve. It was seconded by Mr. Blathers.
Thank you. Things I have to pay attention. Got it. Thank you.
All right. As I understand it, we have no new business. So we move right along to old business. Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you. I prepared a memo summarizing what we discussed at our March meeting relative to the changes in the code. I think it might have been January, February, we started down this path with the number one purpose being to clarify when a zoning permit would be required to enhance our enforcement, because too many people were bypassing the zoning permit process when they did not require a building permit and going about doing things, and then we were catching up with it later. So we looked at the code and decided the best way of doing that was to explain what structures are, because basically structure is anything you're constructing. And so we clarified that section. That led to a discussion about what would our standards be for driveways. You know, what's construction standard that we want? Where do we want that standard applied? When do we want a driveway to be inspected and permitted? So we started updating definitions of driveway with the definition of structure. Part of the driveway we wanted to be properly constructed was where the driveway apron crosses the public sidewalk. So we brought in a definition of a public sidewalk. It also led to a discussion of, well, how much of a front yard would we permit a driveway to cover? And looking at our code, it prompted me to say we need to update our minimum lot area requirements, because we were headed backward. We had a minimum of 11,000 square feet required for a single-family residence and 4,000 square feet required for a multi-family residence, which made no sense. So what I brought forward to you were these proposed definitions, some of them new, some of them tweaked, to get us to a position where we can define when a driveway can be constructed, where it can be constructed, how it can be constructed, and what those standards would be. Then we brought in a code update relative to fences and fence heights, which gets into our constant variance request. I want a 6-foot high fence. We talked about we're granting that variance month in and month out for rear fences, but at what point do we want a rear fence still to be 4 feet in height? So that's where I brought forward some of the language that says as it's visible from the street, so as you come up on your lot line and then turn to connect to the house, that turning point would have to be 4 feet or decorative. So we're not seeing a massive stockade. You have a stockade along both sides, but there it has to be decorative. And any portion of the fence that may abut your neighbor's property, so they're not looking out their bedroom window or their kitchen window and seeing the stockade, that also has to be 4 feet unless you do it decorative. Decorative being a fence top or a shadow box. And I would recommend, if we make this recommendation to go on to council, that we put into our code just some pictures, not saying that's the fence you have to build, but giving them examples to know when that fence would be appropriate with the fence topper or some type of lattice work. So I put all this, the summary, and hopefully you received it to walk through it. I kind of gave you a walkthrough right there, but if there's questions or you want me to go into it in more detail, we can do that.
Two things that I personally, that kind of stood out to me or that I wanted to throw out there for some additional thought. First of all, the kind of backing up a little bit to the description of or definition of driveway.
Mhm.
And we may have addressed this in the last meeting, I don't recall. But the Montgomery definition of a driveway is basically a paved area that connects the street to a garage.
To the residents, correct. Well, there's a distinction between an access drive, which would be commercial, where we do have different strict standards, and then residential driveway, which comes from the street, the curb cut, to access the property itself.
Right, but I believe that the Montgomery definition actually identifies that it connects the street to a garage, whether it be attached or detached.
I
And
think that's in 1123.162 on page 1, where it says driveway private residence.
Yeah, a paved drive extending from the street pavement to a private garage or garages on a residential lot, which is used, this would be the new definition,
right,
which is used by residents of the lot for vehicular access to and from such street and for temporary storage of registered and licensed motor vehicles.
so the only reason I bring that up is that for us, it's not always, and especially as we recently we've kind of gotten away from the requirement of covered parking. It's not always leading to a garage. So I don't know if we need to clarify that at all. The definition of a driveway isn't necessarily just
To a garage.
to a garage. Sometimes it's just a parking area.
Well, I think our code still says that all lots shall have covered parking, covered garages.
Okay.
Yeah, but like we did the house on Elbrook, we gave them a variance to fill in the garage.
Right.
So that doesn't have a garage. There's multiple houses. So could they then say that's not a driveway? It doesn't count because it doesn't go to a garage.
Or maybe what we need to do is look at, just as we've expanded the fence requirements, maybe we need to expand the parking situation where a covered or enclosed parking space is not necessarily mandatory.
Do we want to go down that path with the code or still require garages or covered parking?
So if we are planning on considering any new development in the village at some point in time, would any of those buildings be required to have garages with pads in front of them?
Yes, under our current code. Now, if the development came forward as a planned unit development, in other words, they lay out the whole subdivision, how they want to style it, how they want to design it, and in that PUD, not proposing attached garages or detached garages or covered parking, but street parking, the planning commission approves it, what you're doing is approving that zoning standard for just that subdivision. My concern is if we eliminate in the code the requirement of covered parking, this is going to open up the door to people saying, well, I just want to put a driveway in my entire front yard and want to park on it.
I don't think we need to eliminate the requirement for the parking, but I think maybe just expand the definition of the driveway private residence to cover those houses that don't have covered parking or garages.
When even the most recent new construction, the Habitat for Humanity house,
Yeah.
we approved a variance to allow them to have off-street parking, but it not to
No
be covered.
garage. Yeah.
And so that's, I guess what I'm wondering is, do we want to consider modifying that requirement too, that it's just that we require a certain number of off-street parking spots, but not necessarily that it's covered? And maybe I'm muddying the waters.
Oh, no.
But if that's the case, then that definition needs to change.
I mean, just scribbling some notes here. A driveway extending from a street pavement to a private garage or garages or approved off-street uncovered parking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's either garage or we've given you approval either in a PUD or by way of a variance, that's your driveway. So you're not gonna be able to just put in a driveway with no end result to it without coming here.
Okay, I think that makes sense. But I like the fact that we're expanding then the definition of driveway to include non-garage. I think, yeah,
Do any of our apartment complexes have just parking lots? I think that,
That's where some of them have been going by closing in the parking. We had that, 2 years ago?
Vera.
Avira, the guy wanted to convert the garages and back to lower level living space, and we had a lot of concerns with it. And one of the ways we said no was you're eliminating covered parking. So he needed so many variances. That was another one. And we just said no. Because particularly down there was such a problem with parking.
One of the
currently, most of the rental properties have either, whether they use them or not, have either garages attached to them or covered park, like the condos have like covered parking behind them.
So the neighborhood was not built for the number of cars that everybody has today. So what we're seeing happen is when they buy the homes, particularly with the under the basement parking, the walls are too thin, and everybody goes, well, I can't park in my driveway. Well, my point of view on that is you have to invest in your property to make it usable. Our requirement is you need to have off-street parking. So that becomes in the wintertime an issue for us because just this past February, we needed to have people get their cars off the street so they could plow. And then we deal with days and days and days after that of people saying that we plowed them in. Well, their cars really don't belong on the street. Everybody should have off-street parking anyway. That was a huge issue of conversation when we limited parking on Short Elbrook to one side of the street. Most of those houses on the western side use their driveways as playgrounds for their kids. In the back, they don't park their cars there, yet they wanted us to provide parking for them. So I think there is a specific message in our ordinances that we want to state. If we need to make a variance through a PUD or look at an individual situation, I think that's fine. But I don't believe we want a rash of driveway eliminations in the village of Gulf Manor.
Well, I don't think that's what we're suggesting. I think what we're suggesting is that we're not requiring that parking. We're not eliminating the requirement for off-street parking, just saying that it does not have to be covered
If approved.
if approved.
Right.
well,
In other words, they have to go either get a variance or as part of the initial development, that it's uncovered. Or somebody's grandfathered in right now because they don't have the garage. We're not going out and saying you're not compliant.
And I just wanted to make sure that our definition addresses those situations.
Yeah, that's not narrow to just a driveway that connects to a garage.
Correct.
It's realistically a driveway that services a personal residence, whether a garage, carport, or approved uncovered. Does that make sense?
Jim, how do you feel about that on an enforcement standpoint?
no, I think the planning commission should have a say in it because if parking is a problem, I think that keeps the door open for flexibility, but at the same time, we still have some oversight.
So it's a matter of language. We're still gonna require a variance if there's no garage.
Right.
But that way we know what they're doing also.
Exactly.
Mhm.
You know, somebody's not gonna pay for the whole front yard.
Right.
Ideally.
Ideally. But that also kind of brings me back to the question of the issue of, or the notion of how we define percentage of front yard covered. And I know you said like those two issues were reversed, but wasn't the lower amount 4,000 square feet and the higher amount was
11,000. 11,000 was for single family residence and 4,000 was for a multifamily.
okay, well, let's say that was reversed and it should be 4,000 for a single family. how many of our single family homes have 4,000 square feet of front yard without any kind of driveway in it?
List 4,000 for the entire lot.
Okay, I was gonna say. All right.
So if we, and I pulled up examples of comparable communities, Silverton and Deer Park. Silverton's minimum lot size is 9,000. Deer Park, which is probably more akin housing stock to Gulf Manor, is 8,000 square feet.
Okay.
So 8,000 square feet is your minimum lot size. Now, there still may be lots out there that are not 8,000, they're grandfathered in.
Mhm.
They're grandfathered in. So if we did that, okay, 8,000 square feet, when you talk about the building envelope, the setbacks, how much space do you really have up front to still put in a driveway? And what we're trying to do is prevent somebody from paving over the entire front yard and saying, well, I can park 4 cars there and 1 can get into the garage. Therefore, it's permitted.
Do we consider allowing like a minimum of a 2-car, a 2-car wide garage minimum? No.
I don't think you can do that. Some of these lots are so narrow you couldn't.
Or maximum, I'm sorry, maximum.
Oh,
Like you cannot have, like, again, you can't pave the whole front yard, but
I mean, you think about that house on Elbrook that's being redone. They've got 3-car wide, right?
okay.
I think it would, it can be. I think the definition is there's 30%.
The one on Braemont, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Did I say Elbrook?
No,
I apologize.
Oh, no, that's right.
Yeah, so the house on Bremont that's being redone, like that's a 3-car garage on the left side, and then technically there's another 1-car garage up on the right side of it. So, I think it probably needs to be like the max, and I think we talked about Montgomery doing it. It's a certain percentage of the square or the frontage,
Right.
Is the maximum, and that's probably, I don't know what that number is, but I don't want to, if it works if someone's house is back, like say, for example, Candy Ralston's house, right? If they decided somebody wanted to buy that and put in a 3-car garage up there, that's so tucked off up in the hill, and it's a ton of frontage, I don't want to limit somebody's ability to do something like that. It's going to be behind the house that nobody is ever going to see, or whatever that might be. Now, that's a garage versus, again, a driveway. I think we limit how wide a driveway can be, but I don't want to limit somebody's ability to build a nice garage.
I guess what I was thinking of was a standpoint of like the maximum amount of front yard
Right.
that they could take up.
And I think that's where the percentage of the frontage comes into
But that's
play.
the thing. It's like the percentage was, I think, of, if I understand, I was originally thinking that number was the frontage.
Yeah.
But you said it was actually for the whole lot.
Right.
But I think we do need to tie that to the front. And that's what I was trying to identify, like what the maximum, whether it's width or percentage of front yard can be taken up with parking.
So in the last month, the contractor appeared at a smaller property on Weehee, starting to dig up the ground right at the property line to install a sidewalk, which would hold a ramp, which would be connected, and I believe they were going to go to the back of the house so the wheelchair could come out. And we stopped that because they had got no permit, no zoning certificate, no nothing. So in our current discussion of our ordinances, there's a setback when it comes to pouring concrete that close to a property line. In addition to the fact that the rule, that house also has if I remember correctly, a sidewalk that extends to the main sidewalk in addition to a driveway that goes under the house. So pretty much you're going to have a fairly wide piece of concrete and a piece of concrete for the house pad or for the sidewalk, and then the driveway, especially on a small property like that. So the issue becomes, I understand the need to possibly have handicap facilities for somebody living in a property, but at what point does the aesthetic of the neighborhood or the permanent alteration of a piece of property like that become, I guess for lack of a better word, a nuisance to the other properties or a detraction from their value? That I think, we see that kind of stuff going on occasionally. And did they ever contact you about that?
Yeah, I'll meet with them tomorrow,
Okay.
the contractor.
So that's where you have a vendor who sold this piece of equipment and basically told their crew to go out and start digging in the yard. And when I stopped them, they were like, well, my boss told me go ahead and do this until somebody stops me. So now there's a big hole out there. That's the kind of stuff that takes up so much of our time in trying to go back and find people and correct what was done that shouldn't have been done. So the one thing that I want to make sure that we've hit the flavor of here is that there needs to be an expectation that when you're doing modifications to your property, you need to get a zoning certificate. So I did not see that in here.
Well, the section that says a zoning permit is required says when there's any structural, whatever the language was. And what we did was, we defined structure to make sure broadly included a driveway, a patio, and everything else. So if you go in vertical, it's automatic, you can have a zoning permit. If you're putting in a driveway, we're now defining clearly a driveway or patio is a structure, requires a zoning permit. That's the modification to 112347. That's the structures include driveways, parking beds, parking areas, and patios. Because that automatically picks up our zoning code, zoning permit requirement. But back to the issue of minimum lot coverage and so forth. Our minimum frontage for Residence A is 40 feet. If we're saying that 30% of your front yard is the maximum impervious surface coverage, that allows somebody a 12-foot wide driveway. 40 feet is 1/3. You have a 12-foot wide driveway. That should be enough for one car to go in. The maximum is 20 feet. Again, a curb. We can permit somebody to come in and then maybe because of handicap accessibility to flare that driveway on the lot and go more than 30% if it's necessary for that handicap. But when we grant that variance, then when that property is sold, it needs to come back into compliance.
So when something like that, when an alteration is made for a specific situation, and that situation then is gone, whether the person moves or is deceased or whatever, do we have the ability to then say that needs to be returned to its former?
Yes, you can put those conditions specifically in the variance.
Okay.
Specifically in there. An example, the gentleman a few years ago who was basically running an auto repair shop in his backyard. And we allowed certain changes to it because the neighbors were complaining about the visibility of it. But he's no longer running his hobby back there. We say you no longer have that exemption for that fence. It's a matter of following up with them and making sure up front they understand it.
Okay.
Any other questions or changes on what was recommended? On the fences, we're okay with the 4 foot, except in the rear it can be 6 feet. And as it turns and it's visible from the street, then it can be 4 foot maximum unless you give us decorative features up top. We don't have to be the aesthetic board to approve those. If we give examples, then it's administrative only.
The only question I would bring up there, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but as far as the decorative fence, Home Depot, Lowe's, many of these companies have pre-made fence panels that you can buy that have the decorative fence at the top. I don't know that we're doing ourselves any favors if the average fence that you go buy at Home Depot or Lowe's that has a decorative section at the top is 18 inches instead of 24. Like whatever that average, if most of those are 20 inches instead of 24, are we going to be right back to where we are like every time And I don't know how we determine that.
You say like anything above 4 feet must include 75% decorative, like
What's the maximum height with the decorative?
6.
6.
So I want to clarify, it's 6 in the back, 4 on the sides with the decorative top, 4 at the front where it comes into the property, turns into the residence with a decorative on top.
If it's 4, there's no decorative top required.
Right.
So if it
And
gets to 6, that's when the top is
The
required.
side at 6 is okay until unless it's on the
Right, if
street
you've got-
side.
If you've got both houses that are side by side, both with the building lot line, it's where this, like the one we had the other day. I want to bring my fence all the way up and I want to encompass my side door so I can just open it and let my dogs run out. Well, now your 6 foot high is intruding on the light and air and the visibility of the neighbor next door. So that's when you should stop. Have it at 4 feet. You can still let your dogs get out, but your neighbor doesn't have to look out the kitchen window and then see the top of the fence.
But it's going to be that way on the sidewalk. Anytime there's 2 houses next to each other, the
Right.
side fence is always going to be obstructing the light.
Unless you end it at the back building line.
Yeah, if it's coming
If you-
past the back of the
Right,
house.
if you bring it
that's-
up your side lot and then turn it to connect to the back of your house.
And I don't look out my back window and only see the back of my yard, I see the sides.
Right.
It's just, anytime you're going to be on the side of the property line, you're going to be obstructing the light and air of the neighborhood.
That's why a lot of communities are 4 foot the max.
So I thought we were discussing 4 foot max on the side, but with the top of it.
Yeah.
Only where it extends further than the
back.
beginning of the house, or if it's on a corner lot where it's facing the street, like where there's a sidewalk along it.
And in all the cases we've heard over the last several years, we've never had a neighbor come in and complain. They usually come and say, I'm all in support of it, the 6 foot. But where we started getting away from the 6 foot was when we had, a couple years back, a corner lot. And the rear yard for that corner lot, he wanted a 6 foot fence, but that 6 foot fence was now along the sidewalk on the adjacent street. And that's when we first said, no, we want landscaping, we want a decorative top if you're gonna do that. So we did it there because of the visible aesthetics. So now we're saying, okay, the visible aesthetics here, as you turn your fence to connect to your house, that has to have a decorative top. I don't know how to say approximately 2 feet. I mean,
I know.
what is the line if someone says, I put that much?
Okay, yeah, like I said,
And I think the devil in the details might be getting some examples to put into the code. And then when we look at those examples, we say, that looks good. Then we look at it, you know what, it's only 18 inches. Maybe we can live with 18. Because all you're doing tonight is making a recommendation that this go to village council for final approval.
when I was thinking about how to address the decorative aspect of it, and I wonder if we don't say something to the effect that it must have at least 25% opacity, for example. So like lattice, whether it's diagonal or vertical, horizontal, would be like a typical lattice would be 25% opacity. So, like maybe we say it must have a minimum of that.
So a minimum of 25% of the vertical.
Or you could
Of
say,
the
so
decorative.
we know that the smallest lattice that we want is 18 inches, right? Or is it 12? I don't know.
I mean-
I don't even know. I'm not offensive, but I think we would probably word it with say, figure out what that minimum is that we want, and then anything over 4 feet must include a minimum of 12 inches of lattice or 18 inches of decorative top.
Terry, would it make sense for us to reach out to Mills Fence just to get some expert advice on materials and construction that are available?
Yeah, to Steve's point, these are standard. We're not asking somebody to go
Right.
build it. They can go build a custom fence, but we're asking them to go get the standard. And if you go online to Fence Toppers, as examples, you will get hundreds of them up here. Vinyl, wood, lattice, shadow box. So we could rewrite it to say, at least such and so percent of the vertical height of the fence at the top shall be constructed with. And if we figure that's 18 inches at a minimum, we can figure out what 18 inches is of a total of 72, so it's 1/4. 25%.
Apparently there's 9 awesome fence toppers out there. So the,
And these people still have to submit a zoning application, so we're gonna
Correct.
know what they're doing.
Correct.
Oh, that's true.
But do you want to just go with, instead of 2 feet, 25%
Sure,
of the top must be
Um,
fence top?
So I was trying to see if, like, looking at a 6-foot panel available from Home Depot, if they actually give any information on like what the top percentage or what the measurement is of the top.
Let's give it any details.
No.
no, let's see, that's okay. Here we go, privacy and vinyl fence panels.
I'm not seeing any details as to what the top percentage is or measurement is.
So here's a standard vinyl panel that Home Depot has.
See, in looking at that, it doesn't look like that top section's 2 feet, but I could be mistaken. Because 2 feet would be
No, you're probably
a
right.
third.
It's not.
So it's 6 feet high by 8 feet wide, so
Well, if it's 18 inches, then it's 18.
That's more like 18
That's-
inches, so it's
If
a,
I built mine, I built mine at 18 inches.
25% of the vertical height of the
Yeah.
top must be decorative style,
that's kind
which of a 6-foot fence, that would be,
18 inches.
yeah. I just don't want to, the goal is to like cut down on the number of things coming before the commission. And so I think trying to take into consideration these pre-built panels, I just think it makes sense to do that.
Couldn't you give it like approximately 18 to 24 inches?
Yeah, if you do 25%, it's got to be a minimum of 18. So you can go 24,
Okay.
you can go 20.
I mean, I think that's a good way to
As long as
handle
at
it.
least the minimum, basically.
Right.
If you go back, go back to one you had before, it was the vinyl one.
of. It had what, Terry?
Scroll higher, because you'll see that it had the lattice, but it also had, like there, you've got your lattice, but you also have your decorative.
So the other one that's becoming popular, and isn't that a vinyl stone fence?
It's an oxymoron.
I don't see it.
Yeah, but that wouldn't meet the, like, I've never seen one of those actually had like an design at the top of it.
Yeah.
So it just, in my opinion, would not be an option.
Hey, there's a beauty there.
Kind of hurts my eyes.
Yeah.
48 bucks for a 2x6 panel or a 2x4 panel.
So this would not be acceptable, right? So
No.
that's it. Well, it's 5 by 5. No, it's so that would not be acceptable. So that's a 6 foot.
All these people want fences, 6-foot fences.
Want it?
Oh, yeah.
And then you had to.
So I can plug in that change. This
If you want it all the way
recommendation
around,
on
the way now,
115101.
you know, Submit the
B. That's all.
paperwork and I'll deny it.
Sorry.
No, that's why we're here. I include the language about no barbed wire electric fences, solid color if you're gonna paint it, vinyl is permitted. Open split rail fences are permitted, but cannot exceed 4 feet in height, which is your typical old farm fence.
Mhm.
And you may have wire mesh behind it.
They're the electrocutions.
And then sidewalk construction standards, that's the last paragraph we have. And that is, again, maximum driveway width is 20 feet. You can have an 18-inch flare on either side of the driveway. It shall be at least, as it intersects the street, 7-inch depth of Class C concrete, which applies also, and if it's asphalt, it's 5 inches. With a subgrade or embankment material meeting ODOT standards. I don't know if we need to get that. That's language I saw.
Yeah, well, it's ODOT is the Ohio Department of Transportation.
Can they do that in asphalt
What's that? The
on the right of way?
Montgomery claims that they inspect
no.
for it.
At the right of way, you've got to have a concrete apron.
That's what I thought.
Here, in our community, it needs to be concrete. Basically, from the right of way forward to the street should be concrete.
Yeah,
Oh, outside the
And-
right of way.
And
Okay.
like Montgomery, they have blacktop. I mean, providing there's no public sidewalk.
right.
I read this wrong.
So the sidewalk itself, the public sidewalk, must meet that same concrete depth standard. No asphalt public sidewalks. So your apron, your sidewalk would have to be 7-inch depth concrete Class C. Past that,
Through the
you can
driveway.
put asphalt in, you can put concrete in, it's 5 inches of depth.
Yeah.
On your driveway itself. And when you put in asphalt, it's gotta have appropriate subgrade to it. So somebody doesn't go pour it on dark.
I'm sure it happens.
No.
So we good with all those?
Yep.
The 90503 stuff is consistent with what our engineer recommends.
If we're good with it, with the exception of those two changes, then we just need a recommendation to pass this on to council as we discuss these amendments tonight. And then council will set a public hearing and then 3 readings on an ordinance. They can waive the second and third readings. They cannot pass it as an emergency because it's a zoning code.
Is there a motion to recommend to council?
So moved.
A second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Then I'll plug in those 2 changes, prepare this for council, so council can set a public hearing. And then I'll copy you all so you can see those changes and pick it up.
Okay. There any announcements beyond our next meeting being Monday, June 6th, assuming we have new business?
The only thing that we would let you know is that there is a community-wide celebration being planned for Saturday, September 18th, that will include a community picnic, fireworks, food trucks, a concert in the park from 6 to 8 p.m. And we'll have information out on our celebration75.com website, probably within the next week or so. That we'll have information out so everybody can pass that along to the neighborhood. We also are moving forward with our economic development program. We're in the midst of purchasing some properties in the business area, in addition to working on our strategic plan. And there's also a housing census that's taking place. So a third-party source is going to be interviewing residents about the future of the village. So that kind of gets you guys up speed with what's happening. Mr. Lanzer, who was our fiscal officer, his last day with us was on Friday, April 29th. So we are currently looking to hire a new fiscal officer. And then second interviews with a couple of people now to do that. So things are good.
What's the date on the,
September 18th.
Saturday, September 18th.
okay.
Got the band hired
That'll
already?
be the first
That's
fireworks.
You have the band already hired?
We do.
That's
They're
a
called the
Sunday.
Second Wind Band.
Second wind?
Did you say Saturday or Sunday?
Sunday, September 18th, sorry.
All right.
What's the time on it?
It's an all-day event, so you can drop in and partake, go home, rest up, and come back. So it's, what we're looking at doing, because there's moving parts throughout the park, the first 2 hours will be a community picnic, that food and so forth will be provided by the village to the residents. That'll morph into a safety day event where we'll have different booths and people from the county participating in things that are of service to our residents. And then the afternoon will be food trucks, a petting zoo, fun stuff for the family. That morphs into a concert from 6 to 8 p.m. and then we'll close the evening with
Petting zoo?
fireworks, sure. Fireworks by Rozzy. So the petting zoo will be gone by the time the fireworks start.
I'm sorry, I'm having
Yeah, I
flashbacks
can do
from
the
the
same,
last
sir.
safety day when the helicopter landed and threw up all that wind and the pig got loose.
Thanks for the Home Depot booth.
All right.
So the cool thing about this is being community driven. So they are looking for volunteers to help plan. This is gonna be a good time.
What are your food trucks?
They're working on it. So if you got some ideas, pass them along to,
I know somebody that has a
Mrs.
food truck,
Snyder.
I'm thinking.
Sure, Mr. Snyder can put you in contact.
The selling alcoholic beverages,
we will be.
we gotta make sure we have the appropriate endorsement on our policy. And then a license.
Had that discussion today with the insurance company.
Good.
License is easy, because I'm assuming it's just beer. Not
Will the
necessarily-
food truck stay until, are they gonna stay from 4 to, I mean, it says 4 to 6, but will they be there until?
We don't have any of these details worked out
Okay,
yet.
I'm just making.
If you'd like to volunteer, you can help determine that.
So
They should stay, right?
I think they should stay until.
So
right.
the biggest logistical thing is having people out of the way while the big stuff comes in, and then trying to have the playground open, because this will be the dedication of the new playground and just all kinds of fun stuff, so.
And all this is gonna be set up.
In the park, in our little park. We've done
So-
safety days before. So essentially, we're combining what we normally do with the 4th of July with Safety Day. And adding a concert and fireworks to it. So,
And moving into September.
yes, to hopefully do some better weather. The other thing that I would share with you, and Terry, and if you're on our email, we had a 100% compliance on our insurance audit, which apparently is very, very, very rare to ever happen. So I'm proud of that. It was
Congratulations.
across all 3 of our departments. So
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We managed to do that in 45 minutes. Good job, guys.
Hey.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
David,
It
you
felt
had
longer than 45
contacted
minutes,
me
didn't
about
it?
It always
So
does.
we're not doing that interview.
Okay.
That is someone from Zeta.
It's all that it's all that talk about concrete.
Yeah.
No, it was the fence.
Have you independently schedule a time.
Concrete was a small portion of it.
It's
Fence is
probably
like-
gonna be a Zoom call, I'm gonna try to sort of phone interview.
Always
So-
fencing.
Any idea when that might happen?
She
Sherry, I
asked
was
me
gonna
if
talk
we
to you
had
about
notified
that
other
video.
people, and I said yes.
Got dismissed.
So, for the next week.
So we'll leave a message and answer all calls.
He thinks maybe we should clean up some of the language in the ordinance.
Yeah,
So leave a message if I don't answer, definitely.
She ruled it's constitutional, but dismiss the charges.
I can understand that ruling. Factually, if they don't have
Oh,
it,
hang
they
on.
can't cite them.
Well, I cited her for her, they just refused to submit it. They said nothing's changed, won't submit it.